Annabeth insists that she can feel it, kind of like Percy felt it about her being okay. She says, quote, Percy, I can feel it. Sorry, just kidding. I wrote a fake quote. What's good? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of The Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I am a 30-year-old man who never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid, but I'm reading them now as an adult because I'm on a quest to determine if this is a book series that we've all been sleeping on. And I'm not on this quest alone. Today, I am joined by repeat guest and great Twitter follow. It's Jania Stewart. Jania, how's it going?
It's going great.
Very excited to have you back. Been too long. Glad that we can solve that issue by getting you back into the mix. I had a fun scheduling time trying to get it all to work, but here we are, and we're ready to talk about the Titan's Curse. Now, we haven't talked to you since we instituted the repeat guests get to answer the fun repeat guest question of, have you ever done one of those sorting type quizzes for who your godly parent is? So, do you have an answer to this question?
Yes, actually, I was listening to last week's episode, and I was like, I've never taken this quiz ever.
Okay.
I actually did it 2 days ago, so this worked out really well. But I took it and it said Athena, so I was like, ooh, okay.
I can see it. Now, does this make you feel conflicted since your Twitter handle does say the Lady Artemis?
Yes.
Are you okay? Is this it wasn't like a self-conflict of identity crisis type situation?
Yes, I was like, especially because throughout this book, they call Artemis like the Lady Artemis. There were a couple of times where my head just like went up like, ooh. But also it kind of surprised me. I think I was expecting like Apollo or something, because like I think one of the questions was like, what is your favorite art form? And it was like writing, art, there's something else. And I was like fully expecting like Apollo or something like that. But Athena was a nice consolation.
I like it. I think it fits. I'm glad that you picked writing, and I was afraid that you were going to say, what is your favorite art form? And one of them was haikus, and then you picked haikus.
I don't think I could write a haiku to like save my life. Like I know we had a unit on it in school. No shade to the haiku originators, but I was like, I don't understand. It doesn't rhyme.
Maybe I am a poetry goofus, and I have no idea the wonderful joy of the haiku. And I'm sure there's impressive origins and all this sort of stuff. But I just feel like when you're just going by syllables, it feels very restrictive.
It's so hard. There's an episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender where they're like going around the Earth Nation or Fire Nation, and Sokka infiltrates a girls' poetry school and they're working on haikus. Okay. And he and like the teacher have like a haiku off until he messes up the syllables and she kicks him out.
Okay, that I can get behind. I love a rap battle. So a poetry slam battle. That sounds like fun. I look forward to watching this episode in the year 2040 when I finally finish all the Rick Riordan books and I move on to do Avatar: The Last Airbender, which, no joke, if I do another one of these podcasts, that's definitely what I'm going to do. Yes. Unless someone backs up the Brinks truck to have me do Game of Thrones, which I will do. But like, someone's got to pay me to do it. I'm not doing that one solo.
I will tell you now, it will take you far less time to work on the Avatar one than it will take you to do Game of Thrones. There's only 3 seasons of Avatar, 4 seasons of Korra, and like 3 graphic novels. So,
all right. Well, I do love the job security that the current Riordanverse has provided. It's very funny when people message me like, oh my gosh, it's going to take like 12 years to get through everything. And Mike Schubert, who's also my boss, who runs the financials for Mike Schubert, the podcaster, Mike Schubert sees that and goes, yeah, it's really good. I like this a lot. Potterless was fun. That only got us through 5 years. You're 30, dude. You got to keep going.
You're literally set, because after this, you have the spinoff series, and then there's another spinoff series, and then there's the Kane Chronicles and Magnus Chase.
There's the Rick Riordan Presents. They're making the TV show. Obviously, I'm going to become best friends with Rick Riordan, so he'll be on every other week. We'll alternate, content episode and just me and Rick just shooting the breeze. So that's going to be a fun time.
I'm going to call it now when it's like Comic-Con and they're in New York and they have a panel for the Percy Jackson show. I just have a feeling that you're going to be hosting it. I just have a feeling.
Let's just say that conversations about that were existent until Rick was too busy to attend New York Comic-Con.
That's okay. There's always next year and the year after that.
Right. It's like not impossible. So anyway, let's talk about Percy Jackson, the books, not Percy Jackson as it pertains to my career. We are here to first discuss chapter 17 and then chapter 18 of the Titan's Curse, where we last left our heroes in chapter 16. We learned that Zoe's dad is in fact Atlas. And I hadn't guessed that he was Atlas because I don't know enough about Atlas to be like, oh yeah, when his neck hurt a bunch of chapters ago, it's because he's holding up the world. I do love the seed that they planted there. But I had guessed that her dad was the general. So that makes me feel pretty good. Feel like I got at least part of it right. So that's pretty fun. And now we get to get into a very exciting chapter.
I remember when I first read this, I never put it together that the general was Atlas. But I think that's also because like some of the Titans, a lot of their punishments that they had, they weren't necessarily like villains per se. You know, like Prometheus is not really a villain. He just happened to show fire to humans and Zeus was like, no, he didn't really do anything bad. And then Atlas was just like, but that was such a huge surprise for me because I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
The problem with me with Atlas is that my knowledge of Atlas starts and ends with the guy that holds up the world. Like, yes. I don't know what he did. I didn't even know it was a punishment. I was just maybe he's just like a nice guy that's, helping out the world by holding it up. Literally nothing.
Nothing at all. I couldn't tell you what he did.
Look, he wasn't in Hades the video game, so how am I supposed to know?
OMG, he wasn't. And I made it past like the first round of rooms. Like I made it from the stone rooms
Tartarus
to
up to
the fire
Asphodel.
rooms.
Yeah.
And I actually made it past the fire rooms like literally once, and it's never happened again. Like never, ever, ever. But I was like, I'm so close. I believe
in you. Real talk. Send me a DM anytime. I love giving strategy tips, and I can tell you what weapons and boons work well. Anyway, I said we're going to talk about Percy Jackson, so let's talk about Percy Jackson. Chapter 17 is called I Put on a Few Million Extra Pounds, and my guess when I saw this chapter title was that the putting on would be him holding up the weight of the world to save Artemis from doing it. And I think this is the most correct I've ever been with a pre-chapter guess.
Actually, yeah. And I did look up Atlas just now just to see. And yeah, he lives up to his name. He was the leader of the Titans in the war against Zeus. And after their defeat, he was condemned to carry the heavens upon his shoulders. So pretty straightforward guy. Mm-hmm. That was one of the easier ones, I guess. And it also gave me like a huge clue as to who her dad was. When I saw like I put on a few million pounds, I said, oh, it's Atlas. Okay.
Yeah. Well, didn't she say it at the end of the last chapter?
I think so.
Yeah.
But me being me, I read the chapter titles like in the beginning beforehand.
Oh, okay. See, me being me, I purposefully avoid them because some of them give them away, not so much as in Percy Jackson, because usually they are very fun and silly and sometimes misdirects, like going snowboarding with a pig. But definitely when I did Potterless, some Harry Potter chapter titles are really, really dead giveaways.
They had nothing at all.
Spoiler alert, in case anyone hasn't read Harry Potter. But I'm honestly surprised one of the chapter titles wasn't Snape kills Dumbledore.
We were so close.
I remember the Half-Blood Prince reveal one. Like something about in Half-Blood Prince, the chapter titles made it pretty obvious who the Half-Blood Prince would be. At least one of them was basically like towards the end was like, I know who the Half-Blood Prince is now. And it's like, okay, cool. So it's not Harry and it's not someone who's dead.
No, literally. I didn't have it on being Snape though. I'll tell you that. I was like, he's what? But it also makes perfect sense for him. That was very like in line with his character to have a special textbook with his special annotations. And it's like, yeah, that matches up for you. I want to know what his sign is.
He's definitely the kind of guy to give himself his own nickname, which is always the worst trait. I'm so glad that someone called me Shubes first and I didn't decide it upon myself. Now, this chapter begins with Percy immediately seeing the family resemblance of the general and Zoe, which of course is like, great for you, Percy. You were just told this. Oh, wow. So eye-opening. They look the same and I didn't notice it 16 chapters in.
Like he hasn't been having visions of this guy every night.
I mean, he had seen him, but this is, again, I really think these books are just so prime for rereading because since it's all prophecy and stuff like that, I feel like there's lots of hints sprinkled throughout. And I would love to go back and read the first Zoe character description and the general character description and kind of see, oh, did they have the same skin tone? Did they have the same hair color? You know, some of the little tiny things like that that don't necessarily seem as important until the connection is known.
Yeah. And I'm also wondering, I feel like I remember you saying this maybe like the last episode or a few episodes back about whether or not Zoe actually exists in the Greek mythological canon. I'm not going to check because I know you have a whole episode of it. But I want to say maybe it is a Greek name. Like Zoe is a Greek name.
Okay.
So I feel like possibly, but I feel like if there was a Zoe, she might be like a wood nymph or, you know, a river spirit. I have no clue, but I don't know if she's like big deal. But now I'm intrigued to know because I realized that was something that I wasn't sure of either.
I definitely want to learn. I do appreciate that Zoe in these books was Zoe with an E with an umlaut, which is my favorite version of Zoe. Apologies to all the Zoes that go EY. You're still great. But it does remind me, there's someone who I email a lot, the representative for the merch store that runs the TNO merch store. Her name is Zoe with an umlaut. And for whatever reason, Gmail's autocorrect sometimes doesn't want to put in the umlaut. If you type, hey, you know, you start to type, hey, Zoe, and then it doesn't autofill. And I always hold down the E and then hit number 4 on Chrome or Brave or whatever I use to make sure the umlaut comes in because you got to do it right. So shout out to all my umlaut Zoes listening to the pod. I see you. I will always make sure I put umlauts in your name. So Percy can see the family resemblance, but he thinks that Atlas's stern look has far more evil behind it than Zoe's stern look. Narrator Percy says, he was all the things I'd originally disliked about Zoe with none of the good I'd come to appreciate. And he absolutely nailed it. Because same thing for me. Initially, I was like, oh, Zoe's such a grump. She's such a stick in the mud. Meh. And then by the end, I love her and I understand her backstory and the struggles that she goes through. And by the end of the 2 chapters we're covering here, my love for Zoe only multiplies because really tough decision for her to make to go on this quest in the first place.
And I think it speaks a lot to the skill that Rick has when he's writing, that he has a way of making you get attached to these characters that like have barely any page time, you know, or have not been around for very long. And like, you're instantly endeared to them. Like Tyson, couldn't understand the Tyson hate in the second book. I was like, he's clearly a perfect being. Like, what is going on?
I don't think I heard any Tyson hate, so I'm glad
Tyson hate from Percy and Annabeth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, true.
I was like, get off of him. He's so nice. But like Zoe, when she was first presented, in a lot of ways, she reminds me of like maybe the way Annabeth would be if Annabeth was like thousands of years old, maybe. They're both very intelligent, kind of fearless as far as fighting goes, very like no nonsense, let's get things done. But I think because Zoe has that extra age on her and, you know, she was alive during a time where like literally girls do nothing. So just her character arc up to this point has been amazing. And I love her a lot because she feels like Annabeth in a lot of ways. And I think her being there when Annabeth wasn't was like a good way to bring that same kind of energy. She's great. I love her.
I do too. The age thing certainly plays a factor. She's just the eternal, I'm too old for this stuff, kind of grizzled veteran of whatever. But she's just been dealing with, I guess, teenagers her whole life.
I would love to know if she was the oldest of her sisters. If she was the oldest sister, it would explain a lot.
So Zoe demands the general let Artemis go. And the narrator has officially switched to calling him Atlas. So I will now officially switch to calling him Atlas, which is good because less syllables and then I can get through stuff quicker. So Atlas implies that Zoe could take her place if she wanted. And then immediately I figured, okay, Percy's definitely going to do this. It would make the title fit. Let's go. Zoe considers it, but Artemis forbids it. And then Atlas bends down to touch her face, but Artemis bites his hand, which I did not expect from Artemis. She feels very kind of reserved and professional and like someone who wouldn't do a low blow, but biting the hand, love it. I think it's a great move.
I love it too because it's also very childish.
Yep.
And she is a child. She's supposed to be 12 years old, or at least appears to be 12 years old. And it's also a thing that you do when you have nothing else that you can do. It's a very desperate kind of a thing to do. I love it so much.
I also feel like if you are holding up the literal weight of the world, I feel like anything is fair game.
Yeah.
You can, you know, kick a dude between the legs, do whatever. Everything is fair. No cheap shots. So Atlas laughs it off, and he says that he'll have all the Olympians taking turns with this task once Kronos rules. And then Percy catches Annabeth's eyes, and she's trying to non-verbally communicate something to Percy, kind of nodding towards Luke, but Percy is too distracted by Annabeth's hair, which has started to turn gray. And he feels bad that, by being in the situation, the stress of it all has given her hair a streak of gray.
Also bold of Annabeth to assume that Percy would care about anything related to Luke when he's made it abundantly clear. Every time she's sad or worried about him, he's like, who cares? He's a bum. He sucks.
Or he would just translate anything, any nod of Luke to, yeah, I'll kill him. Yeah, he's the worst. It's his only thought about him. Thalia, as if she can read Percy's mind, says that it's from holding the sky and that, honestly, the weight of the world should have killed her. So Thalia's perception power, just off the charts. Percy asks why Artemis can't just get rid of the sky, which Atlas laughs at, but he must not realize that this is a middle grade book, and Percy asking questions is just how the audience learns about things. So come on, Atlas, give him a break. He's doing this for all the children reading, or the Mike Schubert's reading that also don't really know how this situation works.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering that too. I was like, you're Artemis, but then also I kind of felt like there was a reason he specifically took her instead of literally any other. And it's probably because he thinks she's while she is powerful, she's one of the least powerful in comparison to a Zeus, a Poseidon, and Athena, something like that. And also at the same time, I think Percy doesn't, because he hasn't taken it on yet, doesn't realize why that's not possible.
Yeah.
He's just stop holding it, ? And she's like, I can't.
It's just the sky. It's just air. How heavy could it be?
Literally. This is something I'm really excited to see how they make it look in the TV show, because I was wondering this myself. I was like, okay, so if Atlas holds up the sky and he drops it, does that mean the entire West Coast, California breaks away and is its own island and that's what happens? Or
and then it's just the scene from End of Z World where it floats off into the side and hangs out with Alaska and Hawaii. Yeah.
What are the consequences? What does this actually look like? Is he holding a globe? Is that what it really is?
Right. Yeah.
It's hard to picture what this might be. And then on top of that, Percy being like, I don't know how to describe it. I'm just like, can you find a way?
In my brain, I was imagining kind of in the dream, they described those dark columns. I was imagining her holding up a bunch of those. But yeah, I am now realizing that I'm also not 100% sure on how it all works. CNC also the earlier points in this episode when I kept saying holding up the weight of the world when it's really holding up the sky. So clearly it's something that I don't exactly get, but yeah, I'm very much excited to see how they do it in the show.
Make Rick answer it.
Rick, come on, add it to the list of questions. Now, Atlas says, quote, how little you understand, young one. This is the point where the sky and the earth first met, where Oranos and Gaia first brought forth their mighty children, the Titans. The sky still yearns to embrace the earth. Someone must hold it at bay, or else it would crush down upon this place, instantly flattening the mountain and everything within 100 leagues. Once you have taken the burden, there is no escape. And then he smiles and says, unless someone else takes it from you. So I guess that's the answer, is just smush pancake. But I also found it funny that he said within 100 leagues, and my brain was like, isn't that the water one?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, that's like water terminology. What does that mean? Is that a couple of miles? Is it a couple of yards? I don't know what that is.
And also 100 leagues, anything under 20,000 leagues, it seems unimpressive to me.
Yeah, we already have 20,000 leagues under the sea, so 100, ooh.
Yeah, James Cameron is reading this book laughing, going, okay, 100 leagues, whatever. So Atlas then questions them being the heroes of the age, and Percy challenges Atlas to fight them. And then Atlas says that immortals don't fight mortals directly. And I wrote my notes, but Ares did? Did you not read book 1?
Literally.
Right?
Or I guess maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe it's an honor thing.
I guess. Yeah, maybe he broke the code to do it. But Atlas says instead that Luke will fight. So Percy says, quote, so you're another coward, which causes Atlas to have a flash of anger in his eyes before turning over to Thalia. And he tells her that it seems that Luke was wrong about her. And Luke, who looks so weak that Percy almost feels bad for him, says that Thalia can still join them, and she can call the Ophiotaurus into a pool of water near them. So Luke still being the worst, on brand. Hate Luke. All my homies hate Luke.
He reminds me so much of Draco Malfoy in this chapter.
Ooh.
In that, like, he's been bad. We know he's been bad. All my homies hate Draco, but like, he's going through something, and it's the first time that you can kind of see that maybe this wasn't just him.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting a sense that he's very well aware that he's super in over his head.
Yeah.
And at this point, obviously seeing Thalia has got to be a big deal because, you know, him, Thalia, and Annabeth are like the anti-Percy group. Like, they went through so much together, and for him to be facing off with her again and seeing, you know, all of these people that knew him before this, seeing what he is now, it's just very like, come over, join us. It's great. And it's like, really? It's so great that you look like you're withering away. Like,
it's so great that you're wearing boat shoes. Okay, Luke.
Yeah.
Sounds wonderful.
He's wearing Sperry's on the mountain.
Yeah. Oh, Luke, you have the little thing that has your sunglasses tied behind the back of your head. Oh, cool Vineyard Vines shirt, Luke. Oh,
you're on a cruise ship. Wow.
You're telling everyone to listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. Oh, real cool.
He so would.
Dude, he so would. He's just got a lot of really good ideas, you know? The way he thinks about things, it's unconventional.
I just really connect to him.
He's just asking the questions. So Percy starts to envision Bessie in the pool, but then Grover immediately Empathy Link warns him to stop doing that because Grover is starting to lose Bessie. So shout out to Grover for being on the case. I hope he's having a fun time on his water adventure. Give me that spin-off book. Give me Grover and Bessie travel across the country.
Specifically Grover, Bessie, and Tyson. As something tells me the way that Tyson gets along with sea creatures and he's so sweet and friendly to them, I just know that he would be like so protective of Bessie.
I mean, maybe Tyson joined along the way. He was doing lots of stuff with the mermaids, you know? Maybe he came through. Narrator Percy then says the following: I tried to make my mind go blank. I tried to think about basketball players. Love this. Skateboards. Also love this as a big Tony Hawk Pro Skater guy in middle school. The different kinds of candy in my mom's shop. Anything but Bessie. And the number one question I have here is, okay, who are Percy Jackson's favorite basketball players? Yes.
Because my first thought was, okay, like this book came out in what, like 2008?
2007, 2008, yeah.
Okay, so right off the bat, probably LeBron, probably Kobe.
I mean, yeah, that's early, but you know, I feel like, and maybe this is my bias coming through,
Carmelo Anthony.
Ooh, love some
He's
Melo.
a New Yorker, right?
Yeah, he wasn't on the Knicks at that time. Someone who I did really love in the year 2007, 2008, Steve Nash. I was a big Steve Nash guy.
I forgot about him.
Yeah. Feels like a kind of up Percy's alley kind of player, you know? Running around all over the place, unconventional, leading his team. I feel like he could be super into the team.
We're going to find out that Percy was thinking about Larry Bird. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
He's one of those guys that really likes the basketball isn't good as it used to be. He's like, oh, Bob Cousy's the greatest.
He's like, I like the 89 Detroit Pistons. I like those guys. That's who he was thinking about.
The bad boy Pistons. I could also see him just enjoying a player with a really cool name from the mid-2000s. Shout out to Stromile Swift, who had the coolest name ever in NBA history. And he was definitely around in the mid-2000s.
Maybe Meta World Peace.
Ooh, let's see. At that time?
Was he Meta at that point? Or was he still, Ron Artest?
It's such an interesting timeline. He might have been Meta World Peace come 2008.
Yeah. Rick, answer this for us. Who was he thinking about? Were these inspirational moments, or was he just throwaway players or something?
It would be funny if he was just trying to think of any player that he can instantly think of, and he was just like, Raja Bell,
Kevin Garnett.
So Luke pleads for Thalia to call the Alpheotaurus, and that killing it would make her more powerful than the gods. And Thalia, in a voice of pain, asks Luke what happened to him. I was crushed. I'm glad Thalia is realizing, and I was afraid that there was going to be this I can save him kind of moment going on, but it seems like Thalia immediately just realizes this dude is lost. This guy is gone.
And I love this because when we think about how old they were when they all got together, Annabeth was 8 or 9 or something like that. And Thalia was already much older, maybe 12, 13. So I feel like her having that difference in age on Annabeth means that she can be a little more realistic about what's going on and what's happening, despite the fact that she cared about him as much as Annabeth does. while Annabeth has like the cloud of, I was a kid and he was my first crush and he was just so cool and, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for her to see who he is now and connect that to the person that she ran into, that she was hanging around, while Thalia, she's been a tree, He tried to get her poisoned. So she's like, F you, man. Get out of here. She's not going for it.
Nope, she's not falling for it. Luke references all the times they curse the gods after their fathers abandoning them, but Thalia just doesn't even address this comment, which I love, and just tells him to release Annabeth. Luke says that she can join him, and then all three can be together and fight for a better world. He then says, quote, "It's my last chance. He will use the other way if you don't agree. Please." And this totally gets to your point where you kind of feel like this is over Luke's head. He's in too deep. Now this had me wondering, okay, what is the Titan's curse? Is it just Kronos returning? Is that the other way that he's talking about? We will very shortly learn what the Titan's curse is. And I'm glad that it wasn't the zombie/skeleton thing, whatever, the bonies. I'm glad it wasn't that, because that felt too easy. And I like the reveal of it when you kind of learn what's going on. It's like, oh, okay, I see.
God bless Rick for trying his best to make those things scary, because when I read it, I was imagining the police officer from Coco who his jaw fell off. He's running after. That's what I was picturing. I was picturing those guys, and I was like, I want this to be scary, but I feel like I saw Coco already, and my brain is just like, no, that's what they are.
Percy gets the vibe that Luke's life depends on Thalia's choice. Zoe warns Thalia not to join them. Luke then makes a bronze, and I'm going to say it right this time, not brazier. Is it brazier?
How is it spelled?
Brazier. I definitely said brazier in the last episode, and that's the other one.
I don't know. I want to call it Brazier, but I don't think that's right.
No, that's right. A show about a guy in Seattle who hosts a radio program.
Which is coming back because it's being rebooted as of yesterday.
Everything. Can't we just make new content?
Wouldn't he be in a nursing home by now?
I mean, if the show's not about him having a podcast complaining about how radio is better than podcasting, then it's inaccurate. But yeah, I'm just going to Google Brazier. It is Brazier. Whoa.
Nice,
if I knew the theme song to Frasier, I would sing it right now, but I have no idea what it is. I'm too young to have consumed
I didn't
Frasier.
even know there was a theme song. I just assumed it was Frasier with the skyline, and that was it.
It's just the Seattle skyline, and the incorrect Seattle skyline where they put the Space Needle in the middle of downtown, where it's not at all. Mm-hmm. It's so far away from downtown. Now, Luke makes a bronze brazier appear for a sacrificial flame. Percy insists that Thalia not go forward with this. The sarcophagus behind Luke glows, which I don't enjoy. Images of new marble walls rise, appearing in the mist. Luke says that they will raise Mount Othrys here, and it will be stronger than Olympus. He points to the ocean, and an army of hundreds approach. Quote from narrator Percy: Dracani and Laestrygonians, monsters and half-bloods, hellhounds, harpies, and other things I couldn't even name. Doesn't sound like a A+ great time.
This sounds like the origins of the West Coast versus East Coast beef happening right now.
Oh, baby. Depending on timeline of stuff, this might be too late, but I love the thought.
My next question is, what is Hades doing in all this? Because I don't know how far away San Francisco is from LA. I'm assuming like 6 to 8 hours, but like...
Yeah, it's an 8-hour drive.
Does he know what's going... Like, he's the only deity that, as far as we know, that's hanging out on the West Coast because he just doesn't want to be anywhere near the other Olympians. I would love to know what Hades was doing during all this. Like, if he was just in the underworld and heard a rumble and was like, just kept going.
It could be one of those classic let them duke it out things. Like when you see two people on Twitter that you hate arguing with each other and you're just like, yeah, let them do it. Luke says that this is just the tip of the iceberg and that first they'll take Camp Half-Blood and then they'll take Olympus. And that just feels like wild stakes, a huge jump from one to the other. First, we will take a summer camp and then the world. Like, it's such a big leap.
It's literally Voldemort. Like, I'm going to show up at this boarding school and I'm going to destroy the boarding school and then I'm going to go after the government. Like, what is this school doing to you? Nothing. Like, why are we putting so much emphasis on this summer camp and this school?
First, a tiny patch of land in Long Island, and then the globe. So Thalia hesitates and struggles a bit, like she wants to believe Luke, but instead she points her spear at him and says, "You aren't Luke. I don't know you anymore," which, So good.
It's so good because I need Annabeth to say the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it means so much for Thalia to be the one who says, I don't know you anymore. You are not the person I knew.
Mm-hmm.
Because if anybody would be more likely to come over to Luke's side between Annabeth and Thalia, it's Thalia, because her dad is Zeus and he literally pretends she doesn't exist. So she probably has more reason than Luke, if I'm being honest. But
Yeah.
just the fact that she's able to like see through that and be like, no, still no.
Yeah, it's really solid. She's got a really good head on her shoulders. I guess being a tree matures you beyond your years. Luke to this replies, yes, you do. Please don't make him, in italics, destroy you, which very, very interesting. I was wondering, what are the implications here? What's going on?
He's gone from being like super confident and bold about switching over to the Chronos. Like if you think about where Luke was in book 1 and how confident he was that he was making the right choice.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so certain, no, this is going to be better. You know, everyone is going to pay for what they did. And by the second book, we see a bit of a difference. But by this one, there's no trace of that. You definitely get the sense that he's just doing this because he has nothing else that he can do. He literally cannot back out now.
Right. He thinks that he can try to fix it and make some of the correct choices and save the people he cares about along the way. But it's not looking good. Not looking good. The army is getting closer, and Percy knows that that's trouble. He looks at Annabeth, and she nods. He looks at Zoe and Thalia and thinks it wouldn't be the worst thing right now to die with friends, which is certainly a dark thought. But this also made me think of any time I'm on a flight and the turbulence is bad, I'm always just thinking, look, maybe this is it, but you know what? I've had a good run.
Same. Literally the same thing. I thought about that. And I also remember seeing like on Twitter, like a while back, there was like a day where people were saying like, who's the better hero, Harry Potter or Percy Jackson? And people were like, I'm sorry, did you face off with 2 gods and do this all before you were 12? Like, no.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me think about how much Percy has experienced and how many near-death experiences that he's had where things look really dicey for him.
Mm-hmm,
and he gets to this point, he's like, hey, you know what? It is what it is. Like,
yeah.
Just that takes a lot. And also shows you that he's just like, I'm doing my best, you know, but whatever.
Right. In Harry's defense, he did have a very mature approach to that in book 7 when he realized, oh, I got to just walk into death. But Percy has been doing it every single book at least once. So advantage Percy. The book then has the following line, and it says, now I said, and then a line break, and then it says, together we charged, which is so great and so hype. And let's take a little bit of a break here for the Titan's Purse, where we'll talk about fun things like new merch and all sorts of bonus content you can hear on the Patreon. And then we'll be back for the action scene. Whoa! Hello and welcome to the Titan's Purse Australia edition. If it sounds like I am upside down, it's because I'm in Sydney right now. So let's talk about some fun things going on with the show. First, we've got new merch on the horizon. At the time this episode goes live, the new merch is not up quite yet, but this week I will be working with the merch company to get a few more things up on the TNO merch store, including enamel pins and signed posters that have art designed from our very own guest, Sarah Barra. There's potentially other things coming out, maybe digital merchandise as well, but it's coming out soon, potentially this week. So make sure you are following the Newest Olympian on Twitter or Instagram at Newest Olympian, because I will be posting about it when it is live there. But we've got new merch coming out, which I'm excited about. Also, speaking of being in Sydney and things I'm excited about, I had mentioned in the last episode to keep October 31st open as a potential live show for Potterless and the Newest Olympian. I don't think that will happen just because I have applied for a work visa in order to legally perform while I'm here in Australia. I have not gotten an answer back yet. I am in Sydney until like November 11th-ish, and then I'm moving on to some other cities. I will try to see if we can get it rescheduled if I get approved. So I don't know exactly when a show will happen. If I am approved for a work visa, though, I do have something in place to do shows in Melbourne on November 23rd and 24th. Currently, one show would be Potterless, one show would be the Newest Olympian, just because the venue's a little bit smaller, so I would want to do 2 2 shows so that enough folks could come through. Again, that's pencil it in status, because before I can do anything officially, I need the Australian government to give me the approval. If the worst case scenario happens and I cannot have any shows happen, I will try to do some sort of meetup and we can gather in a park and say hello and do something. But I'm trying my hardest to make these shows happen. And if things don't happen, or even if they do happen, I will try to do another set of shows in Australia. This is just Kelly and I are on vacation and I'm trying to make shows happen while we're here. It would be very fun to do a dedicated, I am coming to Australia and New Zealand to do a tour. So that could be later down the road. But rest assured, I'm trying to make the shows happen. Please, again, follow us on social media, because then I will post about stuff as soon as I know about it. I'm thankful for all of you for understanding this wild situation. I'm thankful for Australian folks giving me lots of cool recommendations. And I'm also very thankful for the folks supporting the show on Patreon. And I want to give a shout out to the newest members of our patron team. So shout out to our newest Super God tier patrons, Elizabeth R. and Grace Anderson. Shout out to our newest God tier patrons, Encyclopedia Faye, Anila T, Lovely Leah, and Emmy R. And shout out to our newest Demigod tier patrons, Maya Sterling, Christine Vasquez, Stephen Trelaw, and Cindy McDonald. Also, correcting some folks whose names I've missed somehow along the way. Maybe Patreon didn't alert me, but I am sorry for never giving you your shout out to Coach Hedge, Little Vomit Spiders Running Around, and Barcha Fotrova. A name correction for Lonnie and Alexia. And shout out to Sarah Elise Arnson for upgrading their pledge. Thank you all so much for your support. May Poseidon bless all of your rain jackets and umbrellas, that they keep you dry so that you yourself don't get wet. Maybe he even gives you Percy's power. I say this as someone who is currently in a very rainy Sydney, and it's currently raining outside, so if you hear raindrops, that is why. Also, just a note about something I will say later in the episode. I will say that no character has died yet, and I realized that I omitted Smelly Gabe, but you know what? I stand by that omission because he sucks so much. I'm glad that I forgot he existed / doesn't exist anymore. Also, if you're all caught up on the news Olympian and you're looking for more podcasts to listen to, just another reminder that I make a bunch of shows. One of those shows is called Horse. It is a comedic basketball podcast that I co-host with my buddy Adam Amawala. The whole purpose of the show is trying to bring more folks into basketball fandom. You don't have to understand the sport. You don't have to watch the games. You can still follow the silly drama and learn about basketball history, and that's what Horse is here for. There are basketball references in this episode, so if you want to understand those a little bit more, you can listen to Horse. We are putting out an episode today doing the NBA drama draft, where Adam and I draft every team in the NBA based on who we think will be the most dramatic over the course of the season. So if you're looking for dramatic storylines to follow this year, you can listen to that episode and be in the know. You can find Horse wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Horse or going to horsehoops.com. And before we wrap up here, you're going to hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to be a full-time podcaster. Some of these ads will be read by me, others of them won't. The ones that are not read by me are inserted locally. So if you live in Sydney, don't be surprised if you hear an ad about bin chickens, which is a fun bird that I saw that folks have let me know about. They look straight up like dinosaurs, and I think the nickname of bin chicken for ibis, which I think is the actual name of the bird, is hilarious. Someone also called them trash turkeys. Super here for it. I don't know what the ad would be about. Maybe about respecting them, but I think they're fantastic. I like them a lot. Obviously, they're no pigeon, but they're pretty good. But regardless, once those ads are complete, we'll get back to this episode of the newest Olympian. And we're back, and let's get into this. So Thalia charges at Luke with her shield with such intensity that the dragon women drop the sarcophagus and flee. They're not up to the task here. Come on, dragon women. Luke slashes his poorly named sword at Aegis, and a ball of lightning erupts, shooting out, quote, yellow tendrils of power. And I'm excited for the 6th book in the series, Percy Jackson and the Yellow Tendrils of Power. Narrator Percy then says, as for me, I did the stupidest thing in my life, which is saying a lot. I attacked the Titan Lord Atlas. He laughed as I approached. A huge javelin appeared in his hands. His silk suit melted into full Greek battle armor. And then Atlas screams, go on then. I gotta say, that's pretty cool. His suit already sounded pretty cool. For it to just immediately turn into battle armor sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And honestly, Atlas, from reading this fight, Atlas is cool as hell.
He's definitely one of the cooler villains in the story, because this is what he does, you know? He is the general. He fights and he does this thing. I would expect nothing less. You know, why isn't Ares doing the same thing?
Right. He's the guy in a rap battle that just knows he's about to destroy you, puts a big smile on his face. Someone in a sporting match that just knows, okay, you know, they're dribbling and then they get a little smirk like, oh, this guy's trying to play defense on me. Okay. Or person in any sort of card game who just knows they have the winning hand. Like, he's just supremely confident, and it's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Zoe tells Percy to beware, and he knows what she's talking about. He thinks back to Chiron telling him that immortals are restricted by ancient rules, but a hero can go anywhere and challenge anyone. So maybe this is the Ares thing? I'd have to go back and read to see if Percy struck first. But once Percy attacks, Atlas can fight back directly at full force. Percy swings Riptide, Atlas knocks him aside with his javelin, and he sends Percy flying into a wall. And the palace is actually rising, not mist. Like, there's a physical, legitimate Mount Uther's palace rising. And this is where Atlas gets even cooler. He goes, "Fool!" And then he swats one of Zoe's arrows out of the way. "Did you think, simply because you could challenge that petty war god, that you could stand up to me?" In italics. So just Ares catching strays. Love to see it. Really, really good.
I love that, because also I was thinking that I would love to see a collab between Ares and Atlas, but for Atlas to be like, no, that guy sucks. He doesn't know war. And it's like, Ares, the god of war, is puny to you? Like, what are you... Wait a minute. Hold on.
It's really good. And then in classic Percy form, anyone mentioning Ares' name makes him really angry, so he's all fired up. He is determined to get to the pool of water to double, according to him, his strength. So I was thinking, oh, of course, get to the pool of water. That makes sense. But that plan kind of gets thwarted pretty quickly. Atlas goes for a javelin slash, and Percy tries to counter with Riptide, but it's too heavy for him to lift now. The aforementioned threat from Ares, which I didn't think was going to happen just mere chapters later, but the whole "when you need your sword most, I'm going to mess with you." And here he is. Ridiculous timing. Hats off to Ares, though. I wonder if he knows that Atlas just talks smack about him, though, because maybe he wouldn't have tried to help him out, but who's to say?
I feel like I was expecting Ares' curse to come way later, like not when you need it most, like before the time you really need it most, because I'm not going to go into spoilers, but obviously there are 2 more books of events happening. So like,
right. I totally thought this was a book 5 thing.
Yeah, definitely thought this would be like in the last book. But then I said, oh, you are a petty little thing, aren't you? Like, just petty. Like, because what's a better time than when he's fighting a Titan? He's fighting someone more powerful than Ares. I love his petty points for that one.
Pretty good. Gotta respect it. So Percy pleads, "Not now!" And his sword has just absolutely failed him. So the javelin hits Percy in the chest, and he goes flying towards Artemis. And then I wrote on my notes, "Oh, Percy, come on, hold up the world so that she can fight, since you can't fight." And looks like Percy might take my advice. Artemis wants him to run. Atlas approaches. Atlas raises his javelin and says, "Die, little hero." And then Zoe yells, "No!" and fires a batch of silver arrows at Atlas, which just sets him off into a rage. Percy knows that he can't beat Atlas in a fight, but he thinks of the Titan's curse part of the prophecy and knows of someone else who might stand a chance. And this is when I realized, the curse isn't the skeleton zombies, it's holding up the sky, which is so good. I think that's great that the chapter title being a surprise that you don't realize until chapter 17 is pretty cool. Like, Sea of Monsters wasn't very long into the book when we realized, there is a Sea of Monsters. I feel like Lightning Thief was also a good twist of who's actually the thief. But the Titan's Curse, like, there was a misdirect with the skeleton zombies and everything. There's also the thought of, is it Kronos? Is it him coming back? Whatever. And the fact that it's just kind of about a character whose background we don't fully know going into the book in the first place. It's so good. Rick is so good.
It's also one of those things where it's like he takes something that we sort of know about, but he's able to work in his entirely own story around it. And I love that so much, because like I immediately was like, okay, now I need to know more about Atlas. And also just it being someone not Kronos really shows you how big this whole battle thing is getting, because Kronos is one guy, you know. The fact that he's getting the Titans on board means that he is not just like, I'm going to rise to power and I'm going to defeat them on my own. Like, he's very aware that he needs other entities to help with this. And I feel like this book is like almost like Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, in terms of the stakes changing and 100%. Things getting so serious and so real, like so quickly. Like, it goes from being, we're just vibing, having fun little adventures, you know, getting into some things. And now it's like, no, people are in real peril and real danger, and like bad things will happen if you don't stop this person.
Yeah, I do feel like the big picture of it all has really expanded over the course of this book, and it makes me so excited for the next two books ahead. And it makes so much sense why everyone kind of enjoys 3, 4, 5 kind of collectively, and it feels pretty evenly distributed for people liking any of those three books as their favorite. I think 5's got a slight edge from what I've heard, but I'm very excited. It makes me so stoked just to see like
Can't wait for you to read book 5.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Because everything is all lined up and book 5 is just pure events.
Let's go. Now, Percy asks Artemis to give the weight to him. She says it will crush him. He says Annabeth took it. And I like that there's a little hint of, yeah, she could do it. I could do it. Artemis says that it almost killed her and she has the spirit of a huntress and Percy won't last as long. Percy says that he'll die anyway, so he might as well just give this a shot, which honestly, good approach. Very level-headed here from Percy. He asks for the weight of the sky and then slashes her chains with Riptide. For a moment, they're holding it together, and it still feels heavy as 1,000 trucks, which I'm glad Percy knows how heavy a truck feels, so he knows how heavy 1,000 trucks feel. But Percy then takes a deep breath and thinks to himself that he can do this. And this is me whenever I'm doing squats at the gym and I'm going up to a new weight, and you get to the point where you're really far down, and it's that little bit of, am I gonna be able to get up, or should I bail out and drop it to the safety side rack things? And when you just go, no, you can do it, and you push through, it's a really good feeling. So I'm glad Percy could do it. But I guess in this case, he would just be like stuck there for a really long time, which sounds not fun at all.
I also love that he's like, well, if Annabeth could do it and, you know, she's standing right there, maybe he wouldn't have felt as comfortable doing it if he hadn't already seen that she had already done it.
Mm-hmm.
Like Artemis is doing it as one thing. She's a literal goddess. But like Annabeth, he's like, you know, this is what she's been doing the whole time we've been looking for her. I can do this for a few seconds. You know, she's been doing this for who knows how long. Like,
yes.
I can do this for a little bit. It's fine. He doesn't really allow himself to like let the circumstances of a situation psych him out of making a big choice if it means that he can save everybody else.
Right.
I don't even know that he thinks about what holding the world would feel like. He's just like, okay, in my mind, me holding this equals Artemis not equals we have a chance of winning this thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And for a 13-year-old, he's pretty well thought where that's concerned. Like, I will say that when it comes to battles and making like the really quick decisions to do something, he's really good at that. This is where he thrives as a character. He has a lot of work to do in some of his other aspects, but this is his thing for sure. Like,
yeah, I definitely was making a joke before. I think that him pointing to Annabeth is just, look, she did it, so at least, like you said, at least I can do it for a little bit. And at the end of the day, I can't be useful in this fight anymore. So you can do something. You might as well be out there. Let me just do this. Kind of like if you're ever playing some sort of like fighting type game with a team element, and I don't know if you're out of spells or whatever, and it's like, look, I'll do this thing just because there's nothing else I can do. You know, I'm all out of ammo. Let me just heal people, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. He's great.
So Artemis slips out, and now he has the full force to himself. And narrator Percy says, quote, afterward, I tried many times to explain what it felt like. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body turned to fire. My bones felt like they were melting. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have the strength to open my mouth. I began to sink lower and lower to the ground, the sky's weight crushing me. And for someone to start this phrase with, I couldn't describe it, you described it pretty well, Percy. I feel like I can understand a little bit of what you're going through. But the thing that made me very happy is that he started this quote with the word afterward. So I knew, okay, cool, Percy Jackson doesn't die in book 3.
Like, we still have 2 more books. He's got to get out of this some kind of way.
I would love it if there's some book series. I don't know if it exists out there. And if it does, no one can tell me because then it would be ruined. But it would be cool if there was a book series where it was, you know, named after someone and then a couple books in, they just die.
Man, Harry Potter would have been something if he would have died in book 4 and the books just kept going.
And then it's just like, hey guys, it's me, Ron. I'm in charge now. Whee!
It'll be Neville.
Oh,
It'll be
Neville. Oh, God, that'd be very funny. Percy then hears Grover's voice in his head saying, "Fight back, don't give up." And Percy thinks of Bianca for motivation. If she could give her life, and I wrote "give her life" in quotation marks because I don't think she's dead. If she could give her life for the cause, then he can hold up the sky. Percy watches the fight, but it's very fuzzy due to the strain that he has right now. And he sees Atlas laughing and fighting, which again, he's so cool. Atlas is so cool, man. I can't stay angry at him. He's too awesome. Artemis is wielding 2 long hunting knives, also really cool. Zoe is shooting arrows into the chinks of his armor. Again, really cool. Glad she's finally doing something useful with her arrows since she hasn't connected on anything since taking down the lion. But apparently these are just kind of affecting him like bee stings where they hurt, but they're not, really incapacitating him.
And I feel like she knows that. I feel like she's trying to do this thing that some people do in fight scenes where they try to make the person they're fighting super angry, so they start slipping up and making mistakes.
Yeah, totally.
And they're not thinking, with their tactical brain. And I feel like that's what she's trying to do here. Like, I think she's very aware that it's not necessarily going to have any real effect, but it's going to be enough to bother him and make him kind of like going into a haze where he's not able to make the same kind of game time decisions he would be making otherwise.
It's like the fighting version of trash talk in sports where you're getting them out of their locked in psyche so that they make a mistake, Mm-hmm. If he's annoyed by these little bee stings, maybe he gets angry and tries to attack her, doesn't see Artemis coming through with a long hunting knife. Could be pretty good, could be useful. Mm-hmm. So Percy also sees Luke and Thalia fighting, with Thalia telling Luke to back down because, quote, "you could never beat me." Love that. That's good. I want to learn more about that.
Love her.
Atlas and Artemis continue to fight. She leads him over towards Percy, and then he hears "get ready" from Artemis in his head. And I was just seeing what was about to happen, and I already liked Artemis, but this is so cool. Narrator Percy says, "I was losing the ability to think through the pain. My response was something like, ow." Atlas then says, "You fight well for a girl," which, okay, now you had a great run, Atlas, but come on. "You fight well for a girl, but you are no match for me." And yeah, immediately I wrote my notes, all caps, "Oh, boo, get the hell out of here. No longer cool," in all caps. Narrator Percy then says, "He feinted with the tip of his javelin and Artemis dodged. I saw the trick coming. Atlas's javelin swept around and knocked Artemis's legs off the ground. She fell, and Atlas brought up his javelin tip for the kill." And at first, before I realized what was happening, I thought Percy was unnecessarily bragging of, "Oh, well, I saw what trick Atlas was pulling, but I guess Artemis didn't." But soon we will see this is probably intentional from Artemis. Zoe screams "no" and shoots an arrow into Atlas's forehead, which lodges in there and has him looking like a unicorn. Incredible.
It's also a good way to say that this is still like a middle grade kind of a book. Mm-hmm. I feel like a lot of times those authors don't really like to show like a huge amount of violence. And this is just like a great way to do it without being like, "it was so gory, blah, blah." Just, he got an arrow stuck in his head like a unicorn. I think we all know what that might look like.
Exactly.
Leave it to your imagination. I like that a lot. It immediately makes him less threatening. Like, he's not the intimidating general. He's a unicorn.
Right. The only other thing that would have been funny is if it went through the side of his head and it kind of looked like the Steve Martin arrow kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's the only way you could look sillier. Atlas screams in anger and backhands Zoe into a wall. He turns back to Artemis, now clearly wounded, noted that he has an arrow sticking out of his forehead. He goes in for the kill, but Artemis grabs his javelin spear when he jabs it down, and then she uses it as leverage to kick and send Atlas flying to where Percy is. Percy lets Atlas knock him out of place and reaccept the weight. And that's when I wrote in my notes, "See, Percy, Artemis let this happen. It was on purpose. Come on." Then I was thinking, oh no, how's Zoe doing? We know someone is going to die at the hand of their father. And I was really thinking, did just a backhand into a wall kill Zoe? But we shall see what is going on with Zoe in a little bit. Atlas lets out a "no, not again," which is the perfect thing. Saying "not again" is so funny.
Because he was just really had a little spring in his step once he got out from under that. He's been doing this for millennia. On one hand, I'm like, but on the other hand, it's what he deserves.
Right. It makes me feel like when you're playing Uno and you finally get rid of all of the extra cards in your hand and then immediately you have to draw a bunch. Like you just finally have gotten out of it and then your hand is 24 cards again.
Yes. Especially somebody writes draw 48 cards. That's the kind of stuff me and my siblings did when we got the Uno deck that had like you could draw stuff on it.
Sure.
We would do stuff like draw 60, draw 50, and there's only like 30 something cards or something. Like draw the whole deck.
See, I would do things like bring me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and draw 12. Make me a snack. So Percy is so tired that he can't even stand. Thalia has Luke backed up to the edge of a cliff. She is in tears. He's covered in sweat. He lunges. She shield smacks him and sends his poorly named sword flying, and Thalia gets her spear at his neck. Luke tries to not act scared by saying, well, but Percy can hear the fear in his voice, and Thalia is trembling in fury. Annabeth pleads with her not to kill him. Thalia calls him a traitor. Artemis runs over to Zoe. Annabeth pleads to Thalia that they can take Luke to Olympus because, quote, he'll be useful. So just like the dynamic you're saying, Thalia kind of realizes that Luke is gone. Annabeth has not gotten to that point yet. And the fact that it was he ... with an ellipsis, he'll be useful, makes me think she doesn't actually have anything in mind. She's just trying to grasp at any sort of straw to keep Luke going.
Right.
Luke asks Thalia if that's what she's after, returning to Olympus in triumph to please her dad. And Thalia hesitates, and Luke then goes for her spear. Annabeth shouts no, but just purely reflexively. Thalia kicks him away, and he falls off the cliff with terror in his face. Love that. But what I don't love is that he's definitely coming back. It's only book 3. There's no way. If anyone has to get rid of Luke, it has to be Percy. There's no possible way, so it's going to be fine. But also, even if he did die, you can't blame Thalia for this because it felt unintentional. It was purely just oh, you're trying to fight me, what? You know, not necessarily a malicious move from her.
Mm-hmm.
Narrator Percy then says the following. We rushed to the cliff's edge. Below us, the army from the Princess Andromeda had stopped in amazement. They were staring at Luke's broken form on the rocks. Despite how much I hated him, I couldn't stand to see it. I wanted to believe he was still alive, but that was impossible. The fall was 50 feet at least, and he wasn't moving. And Percy, come on, man. Come on. He's totally coming back.
I don't really actually remember how he bounces back from this, but I feel like him being the son of Hermes has something to do with this some kind of way. I'm assuming there's some kind of like wings on the feet moment, like some sort of something, because how else do you explain him not dying after falling?
My only explanation is he's the rival in a middle grade book, and there's 2 more in the series. That's my only explanation. Between
roaches and Luke, after a nuclear fallout, both will live forever.
Luke, a roach? Yeah, I can see it. A giant screams to kill our team. Javelins get launched in mass. Percy grabs a grieving Thalia and runs past a cursing Atlas. They approach Artemis, who is also struck with grief, because apparently Zoe's wound is poisoned. And I still at this point didn't realize what was going on, but we get the explanation. Percy is in shock, as was I, asking if Atlas poisoned her, because I was thinking, did he have like poison in his hand or something? Like, what's going on here? But Artemis says that it wasn't him, and then she points to the wound from Ladon from before, which both Percy and I completely forgot about, because these books are so great and there's so much action that I forget things that happened 10 pages ago because I'm so engrossed. Completely forgot about the big dragon attacking Zoe. So Zoe says that she cannot see the stars. Percy calls for them to get nectar and ambrosia, but no one moves. They're all just frozen in sadness, but also frozen in dread as the army approaches. But then they hear a buzzing sound, and I could have guessed 100 times what was going to happen in this chapter. I never would have picked Annabeth's dad flying in on the old plane from before. A Sopwith camel entering the fray with Dr. Chase inside. Ridiculous in the best way.
I adore this so much because Annabeth's dad reminds me a lot of Percy's mom.
Yes.
And I love seeing someone else's parent do something like this for their kid, because we spend a lot of these books hearing about how like parents abandoning their kids and pretending they don't exist, or the kids having to leave their families because it's too dangerous to be around them. So like to have Annabeth's dad be like, I don't care what's going on, and actually I really don't even know what's going on, but I'm going to do some kind of something. It's just so cool. I immediately was like, okay, that's why Athena kind of liked you at first. I get it. I get it. he's a great, great guy. And I love that Annabeth gets to see this because she's previously said, like, oh, my dad, they don't care about me, like, whatever, whatever. And it's just such a great moment. I love this. It's just amazing. I love seeing book parents come in and face the dangers that their kids are facing and like just try to do literally anything that they can.
It's awesome. He comes in saying, "Get away from my daughter," and his machine guns burst to life. And I thought, how is this legal? That gets answered later. Annabeth is shocked. Artemis calls him a brave man and says that they must get Zoe away from here. She plays a hunting horn. Percy begs for Zoe to hang in there. Dr. Chase fires away, which makes Percy realize that he must have gotten celestial bronze bullets, which is super cool. Annabeth is very proud. The moon is out, so a silver chariot drawn by deer arrives. So they all load in, they wrap Zoe in the blanket, and they fly off. Percy, who is still in pain, murmurs that the chariot is like Santa's sleigh, which prompts Artemis to say, "Indeed, young half-blood. And where do you think that legend came from?" Love when they do this. Love when they do this.
Does this mean that Artemis was flying around like dropping gifts off to people or something? Like, because the legend implies the entire story, not just the character. So like, Artemis, what were you doing, girl? What was going on? She's just throwing out like bows and arrows to all the girls in ancient Greece.
I think what she was just doing was flying around giving brochures to every teenage girl. I think she was just, street team was out there trying to get recruits.
She's just throwing them into the air so they all land in scrolls on the ground.
They all go in chimneys and come out into stockings. Yeah. So Dr. Chase follows them. The army gathers in anger atop the mountain, and Atlas yells out curses against the gods. And that's the end of chapter 17. And let's quickly go through chapter 18, which is not very long, which is called A Friend Says Goodbye. I just wrote in the top of my notes, all caps, "Zoe dying? No, dude, come on." I don't like how easy this one was to guess because based on how chapter 17 ended, I knew what was ahead, and it made me really sad. Mm-hmm. They land in Chrissy Field after nightfall. Annabeth immediately runs up and hugs her dad. He blushes and he tries to downplay it. She asks, "How did you get bronze bullets?" He implies that he repurposed old weapons from her Virginia room when she ... left, which is a very sad thing, but also, did he ask permission or was it just like, "Oh, she doesn't need this stuff. Let me just smelt it into bullets"?
I wonder if he did that just in case she ever came back so she would have a more efficient way of defending herself. Mm-hmm. Because he said he melted them down. Like he could have done something else with them. He could have sold them. He could have, done whatever. But yeah. I think that it speaks to his intelligence and the way that he's constantly trying to invent new things, that he's like, there's another purpose for this that I might be able to use or she might be able to use. And it's just so cool. I love that he clearly was still thinking about her, even though she did run away. Mm-hmm. And it very much feels like he was expecting her to come back at some point and just wanted to have something there for her when she did.
Totally. So apparently he melted some old weapons down to make bullet casings, making him officially the coolest history professor of all time. Shout out to Mrs. Gensimer, though. You really made AP US History easy for me. Much love to you, Mrs. Gensimer, if you're listening to the pod.
Shout out to the AP US Histories of the world. Those teachers are great.
It was so funny because Mrs. Gensimer, her class was so hard. It was so hard. And I remember being so angry with her at how hard her class was. And then my entire class, we all felt this way. Then we all went in and took the AP US History exam. We all got 5s. We were like, that was the easiest test I've ever taken in my life. And then we all 180'd on Chrissy Gensimer. We were like, you are a legend. Thank you so much. And she also did the cool thing of like teaching us the points in history where America was bad, which I feel like is tragically incredibly rare. Definitely. In history classes. So it was nice to learn about things like the tragedy in Tulsa that a lot of people were like, I didn't know this was a thing. And I was like, isn't that just part of the curriculum? So shout out to Mrs. Gensimer. Second place, though, to Dr. Chase. If you shoot people with magical bronze bullets, then
flying an airplane,
then you can
a warplane.
Then you can get back your number 1 spot. Percy can now see why Athena took such a liking to him, as you had just referenced earlier. He's got a little bit of mad scientist inside of him, and I think that's just a great way to describe him. Zoe is in rough condition, and they have no ambrosia or nectar, which, how do they not? I guess for the plot of the book, but how does no one have any? That was beyond me.
Nobody has it.
Baffling to me. I think it would have made more sense if there was something where they had it and they lost it, because no one having any just feels Wild. It just feels so illogical that they had time to pack for this trip and no one brought any.
No one. Nobody brought anything at all. And it's like, when you look at who all was there, Artemis, Annabeth, Grover, Zoe, Thalia, Percy,
Right.
Bianca was there at one point. Like, they were going out on a quest, and they normally get that when they go out on a quest. So just really curious that Chiron was like, oh, we're fresh out. Sorry.
Yeah.
We don't have any more.
Ridiculous. This is, I think, one of the few times where I'm just like, plot hole wise in the book, this is just not holding up. Zoe is shivering and the faint glow around her is fading. Percy asks Artemis if she can heal her since she's a goddess. Artemis says that she can try, but if the fates have decided her fate, then that's that. Zoe asks Artemis if she's served her well. Artemis says that she was the best of her attendants. Zoe says, rest, at last. Artemis says that she'll try to heal the wound, but Percy can tell that it's more than the wound. It's also the blow that Atlas dealt her. And Percy then gains tremendous respect for Zoe, and this made me realize it too. I also gained lots of respect for her because she took this quest 100% knowing that she was going to be the one that dies. That's so impressive, especially for someone who's immortal, to realize, all right, this is the end of my run.
Yeah, Zoe, I just felt immediate, like, okay, I love her because first of all, she got injured from that dragon. She got poisoned. And then she showed up to fight her dad, a literal titan, and was kind of like had him on the ropes. And it just made me wonder if that's how she was fighting when she was poisoned by a dragon. What would she have been like in perfect health? Like, she really was just amazing. Just so amazing. I love her.
Mm-hmm. So I was very surprised by what happened next. Zoe grabs Thalia's hand and says, I am sorry we argued. We could have been sisters. Zoe already has improved so much in my how much do I like this character rankings. And to go to this level in your dying moments, my goodness. Thalia says that it's her fault, and Zoe was right about Luke, heroes, and men. Zoe hits her with not all men, which at this point in time was fine, but now in the era of hashtag not all men, I laughed out loud when she said this.
I literally groaned. I said, oh boy. Tomato, tomato, tomato.
Yeah, I'm excited for, the next line when Zoe rants about cancel culture. Zoe then asks Percy if he still has the sword, and this caused me to wonder, what happened to the poorly named sword Backbiter? Did that fall off too? It wasn't just on the ground. I hope they didn't just leave it there. I imagine that it fell down with Luke and he got it, because there's no way that they would have just left it on the cliff's edge.
I wonder if his returns to his pockets too. Like, does everyone's weapon do that, or is it just Percy?
I think it's gotta just be Riptide. That's too cool and too unique. Mm-hmm. And if your sword is named Backbiter, no way. No. It's the worst name. It's such a bad name. Zoe says Percy is nothing like Hercules. And to clarify, the books call him Hercules, right?
It's Heracles.
I know it's supposed to be, but do the books call him Hercules?
Yes.
Okay, because I had a couple people email me saying, Hercules is the Roman one and Heracles is the Greek one. You're saying the wrong name. Look, this is a Percy Jackson and the Olympians podcast. Whatever the book says, I read/write/say on the podcast.
And I think he did Hercules just because that's the name that people are going to recognize anyway.
Totally.
Even if you say it's Heracles, they're going to be like, you mean Hercules? So it's just like, it's fine. It's like in Hercules, the movie, the animated one, when the little kids are trapped under the thing and they said, somebody call IXII. Those are Roman numerals. Why would the Greeks be using them? But they're just like, just go with it.
Yeah, I think this is definitely it's in the zeitgeist. Hercules is the more common of the two names. But yeah, for the folks trying to correct me, I'm correct because I'm doing what the book says. Huzzah! Yeah. I've also had people saying that I'm pronouncing Demeter wrong, but I just say Demeter because that's what they say in Hades, the video game. They actually have a really long thread that explains why they pronounce it that way, because they wanted Demeter to be different from the normal representation of Demeter. So I think Demeter might be more common, but Demeter was like the first one I heard, so I go with that.
In my mind, I call her Demeter, but like I never say that out loud because I don't like the way it sounds. Like,
okay, that's also the thing. It just sounds like maybe it is correct in the Greek, but it's one of those things that just sounds wrong. Like it just sounds like you're reading the word exactly as it is, and it's just like there's no way.
Exactly.
There's no way. The other problem I have with it is one of my buddies on my improv team in college was named Dimitri, and we always called him Demeter as just like a nickname / joke. So it's weird for me to be talking about a god and be like, ah, yes, my friend Dimitri from college.
This is a safe space, so I feel like I can admit this. But whenever I first read the name Persephone as a kid, I thought it was Persephone. And I said, who names their child Persephone? That is a terrible name. But I was afraid to say it out loud because something in my spirit was like, it's not pronounced like that. It's not. It's not. And I just waited until I heard someone else say it. And I said, that sounds better.
I feel like it should be a law that for books geared towards children, in the back, there should be a pronunciation guide.
Definitely.
Or at least like a URL. Now in this day and age, at least a URL to how do you say everybody's name? And then you can go and you can have someone say all the names, and then we don't have to have arguments about Thalia versus Talia, etc., etc. Anyway, Percy Jackson. Zoe says that Percy is nothing like Hercules, not Heracles, Hercules, and she is honored that he carries a riptide. She then tells Artemis that she can see the stars again, and she passes away, which was crushing. Everyone is crushed. A silvery wisp of smoke releases from Zoe's lips, and Artemis catches it, says a blessing, breathes into her hands, and releases it into the sky. And while this is happening, Zoe's body is shimmering, and then it disappears. And then Zoe's spirit becomes a constellation of a girl running with a bow. So cool. That's how constellations are made. So cool.
I love this. This is something that pops up a lot in a lot of Greek myths, that if somebody does a bunch of honorable things, they become a constellation. Like Hercules does become a constellation for all of the stuff that he does. You know, Zeus feels bad that he dies from some kind of like poison skin or something he wears in the myth, and he dies as a result. Zeus feels bad and it's like, oh, put you up there, you know? And I think that that is so cool because Zoe is not a deity, but
right.
She acts with all the power and authority and bravery of one. And I feel like this was such a good end for her. And it also, I think, is a good way to introduce like the concept of death to smaller children.
Yes.
Because she's dying in a really sad and kind of a little bit gruesome kind of a way.
Right.
But to kind of skip over those details of how she looks from these injuries and focus on how she's feeling, and that transition once she passes away, I think was really cool.
Yeah, and this is the first death in the books, I'm pretty sure. Even the villains that have been defeated before, no one's died, so it's intense, but I think they handle it well, and I agree with you completely. It's a good way for young listeners to understand how it all works, so I really enjoyed it. As sad as I was, it was very, very well done. Speaking of the constellations, though, I really want to know what Orion's belt did. Like, that belt must have been really cool that the belt got a constellation.
It was a Texas belt with the big buckles on it. Ooh. Or it was like the mid-2000s belt where they had like the LED lights on it.
There's one belt that I never had because I was too small, but I saw it in an Urban Outfitters when I was like 13, but it just didn't come in a size small enough. It was a white belt with a good chunk of the periodic table going all around it, just kind of like imprinted in it with like the leather color behind it, so it wasn't like too obnoxious. Oh man, it was so cool, but it just wasn't. I was too small. Now, with all this settled, Artemis is upset and says that she must go to Olympus immediately. She cannot bring them with her, but she can send for help. And before leaving, she tells Annabeth that she is brave beyond measure and will do what is right. She then turns to Thalia, who is at first hesitant to make eye contact, but they eventually do, and Artemis softens her expression, which they don't really explain, so I was very confused and intrigued. She then tells Percy that he did well, ... for a man. Love it, good, get that dig in, A+, no notes. Narrator Percy then says, I wanted to protest, but then I realized it was the first time she hadn't called me a boy. So he quickly converts this into a compliment. It's so good.
I love this. I love it. It's right up there with Dionysus finally calling him his real name at some point. And he'd be like, Percy Jackson. He's like, you just called me my name. No, I didn't. Peter Johnson. Like,
yeah.
It's very like that. And I love that it's like definitely a sign of respect. And he knows her well enough, at least at this point, to be like, okay, that's a compliment for her. Like coming from her, it is a compliment. So I love that. I
like the silver lining he does here. She leaves. Dr. Chase says that she's nice, but he prefers Athena, which feels unnecessary and also kind of strange since Artemis is 12?
I think he said that because Athena is the one that he had Annabeth with. And he's saying, like, she's cool, but, you know, Athena, that's my girl right there, you know?
Yeah, I just don't know why he had to make it a competition.
Yeah, that was a little odd. I feel like if it was, like, Aphrodite or something, it would feel like a little more suited, but
Right. And it just feels like you could have just said, she was nice. And not be like, but I like my ex-wife better. Annabeth begins to apologize, and then Dr. Chase tells her to do what she must, and he knows that this is all very difficult for her. Great dad. Love this. Then 3 Pegasi appear, 2 white, and 1 is Blackjack. He comes in saying, yo, boss, you managed to stay alive okay without me? I'm so glad Blackjack's back.
I just want to say that I truly despise the way that Blackjack is voiced in the audiobook.
It's so bad. It's if Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind ever was real. Top of the list, delete the Blackjack voice that they do, because I overheard it for maybe 5 seconds while Kelly was listening to the audiobook in prep for one of the live shows we did. And I had to run in to the room where she was and say, Kelly, you have to turn this off. I also don't like the Percy voice, because the Percy voice is very like, I'm Percy Jackson. It's like, the audiobooks are... I've learned now the hard way. They're really bad. But yeah, the Blackjack voice is really rough.
And there is also, because I was rereading this as I was listening to the previous episodes for this book, the author has a very odd way of narrating his Asian characters. Like,
oh, you mean racist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way that he was narrating Annabeth's mom. And I was just like, why? Why are we doing that? It just is not good. I would just love to know if there's like some kind of re-recording in the works, because I don't like it at all. And I imagine Blackjack as a New York accent, cab driver kind of a guy. And I'd like to stick with that in my brain. Yeah,
the voice that he does for Annabeth's stepmom is horrendous. Like, it's Breakfast at Tiffany's level of Asian stereotype. Yes. I was astounded how bad it was for something made in the mid-2000s. Like, things weren't great at that time.
How did they let you get away with this?
Yes, not a single person ever was like, it's truly bad. Like, truly, 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 truly bad. Anyway, Blackjack is back, Jack, and he alerts Percy that he has brought his other 2 Pegasus friends, Guido and Pork Pie.
These are Pauly D.
And the situation?
Yes.
Yeah, sounds about right. It's funny, now with these being his friends, I've realized why everyone was so on board with me giving the New Yorker name to Blackjack, because I just did it because he said, hey, boss, but then afterwards realized, oh, boss, he might be just literally calling Percy boss, but everyone else who I've talked to is like, no. Canonically, I always thought New York, and this is why. Guido and Pork Pie. Oh, so they're all New Yorkers.
And I just imagine him sounding like he just smokes cigars. Let's say it's like, hey, boss. Like, he sounds like the guy in Hercules who's like, you want to buy a sundial? Like, that's what I picture for Blackjack.
The other shout out to Pork Pie, because I don't exactly know what that could be a reference to or whatever. The only thing I know is that pork pie is a type of hat, and I guess that maybe gangsters wore pork pie hats.
Oh,
so that was the only thought there.
Okay.
But when I played Rocket League, which I played for quite some time with some of my engineering work buddies, we were the type to play the game but not spend any money on the game. So we didn't get all the cool hats and accessories and stuff. But you can put hats on your car, and we all got pork pie hats because it was one of those things where like the gaming community decided that those were like cheap to buy with the in-game currency. So we were like, let's just all get pork pie hats because they look stupid.
Oh,
we all had pork pie hats in different colors, and we were the pork pie squad, and it was so fun.
That is amazing. I love that.
So Blackjack asks Percy if he needs any of the crew stampeded. Fantastic. Percy says no, they're all friends, and they just need rides to Olympus. Blackjack says they can't bring the mortal, which Percy understands. Dr. Chase starts to go all history nerd on how the Pegasi would have changed the war, but Annabeth gives him a, Dad, you're embarrassing me. So he wishes her goodbye and gives her a hug, and he says, Annabeth, I know, ... I know San Francisco is a dangerous place for you, but please remember, you always have a home with us. We will keep you safe. Love this. No answer from Annabeth, but she has red eyes and turns away and goes atop Guido. Dr. Chase wants to say more, but holds back and just waves. So touching. Such a tender family moment. They all depart. Thalia sleeps on Pork Pie mid-flight. Percy and Annabeth ride side by side on the other 2. Percy says that her dad seems cool. She agrees, but says that they've argued for so long. Percy suggests maybe he and her stepmom have gotten more chill over the years, and Annabeth says that SF is too far from camp for her to live in. So, still some complex stuff going on, but I have hope for them.
I also love the way that Percy navigated this conversation, because there's a point where she asked, like, if he thought that she was lying about the way that her parents were. And he specifically uses the word cool to seem like, I'm not saying he says like, I didn't think that you were lying. I'm just saying maybe they're like cooler than what you told me they were. And I think that that's like a good balance for him to take on this situation.
Yeah, it's a good dodging of, I'm not fully answering your question. I'm just saying maybe they're better now. So I'm not discrediting your earlier assessment, but they seem pretty nice. Yeah, it was masterful work.
He's such a great friend about these kinds of things.
Yeah, he's really good. Percy is scared to ask, but he does so anyway. He asks, quote, so what are you going to do now? And when I first heard this, I go, that's not a very, he's talking about if she's going to be a huntress or not. She says that she doesn't know, but she thanks him for rescuing her. Percy says, no big deal. That's what friends are for. Annabeth is surprised that he didn't think she was dead. Percy confirms that he never thought that. He had supreme confidence in her being okay. And she says that Luke isn't dead either. But Percy thinks there's no way he could have survived the fall. And that means he's definitely alive.
And well, no scars, no nothing.
He is thriving. It actually popped his back into place to where he feels better. It was actually a chiropractic fall. Everything is good for him. Annabeth says, quote, Percy, I can feel it. There's 2 more books in the series. Just kidding, she did not. That is the one time when I say quote that I did not directly quote it. Percy does not like being compared to Luke, which I think is so on brand and so wonderful. His hatred towards Luke is
everlasting.
It's delightful. Num, 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 num. Give it to me all the time. They then get to New York very quickly, just mad quickly. They get to New York, prompting Blackjack to ask if they'll get extra hay for breakfast as a reward.
Aww.
Give him all the hay. Come on. Annabeth reiterates that they'll see Luke again and that he's under Cronus' spell. And then I just thought, oh no, is he going to sacrifice himself at the end of the book? I don't want that. If Luke turns into Snape 2, I'm not here for it. I don't want him to be a bad person for most of the book series and then kind of have a slightly redeeming moment. I want Percy to vanquish him in battle. I want that to be Luke's demise. And if he does some sort of like, oh, I finally realized the errors of my ways, I'm going to be upset. Maybe this will age poorly or well. Who's to say? But I don't like it. I don't like it. Narrator Percy then says, quote, I didn't feel like arguing, though it made me mad. How could she still have any feelings for that creep? Love that he called him a creep. What a good, the creep.
There's something so like saying that someone like you're a weird person. Like if you tell someone they're being weird, like that's a very specific insult to say. You tell someone they're being a creep. That is a very specific thing that you're conjuring, and he is a creep.
I don't think it fits for Luke, but I still 1,000% approve of Percy's usage of it because it's so funny. It's so funny.
I'm not gonna lie, a guy that's toting around a sarcophagus with a body parts inside, it's creep. It's giving that. So yeah. Maybe he's not far off. Maybe there's a lesser word, but he's not far off.
Look, it's giving creep. It's giving weirdo.
What the hell is he doing here?
Georgia. Narrator Percy continues, how could she possibly make excuses for him? He deserved that fall. He deserved ... Okay, I'll say it. He deserved to die. Unlike Bianca, unlike Zoe. Luke couldn't be alive. It wouldn't be fair. And the fact that Percy's mindset about Luke is always, I want this guy dead. It's intense, but I'm here for it. He really hates him, and I love how much he hates him.
I love this, too, because it means that if they ever were to get into battle and, like, you know, Percy was in a position where he could potentially, like, kill him, we will not have the whole, I don't know if I can't kill a person. I just can't do it. You know, like, no, he spent so much time, like, being in situations with this guy and being like, literally all of this would be easier if he was dead. Like,
Right.
That's one thing that I love about Percy is that, like, he definitely doesn't, like, Batman has that hang up for a little bit where he's like, I don't want to kill anyone. And it's like, dude, you're fighting crime in, like, the worst city on the planet. Like, come on. You got to do something. You have to do something.
You can't trust the jail system of Gotham. People break out all the time.
The security there is dollar store toilet paper strong. Like, people walk in and walk right back out.
Yeah, so I agree. I don't think Percy is going to have a Polyphemus 2.0 situation where he has a moral quandary. I think if he gets the opportunity, he's going all out. So then the chapter ends by Thalia waking up and alerting the team that the winter solstice has started and the Council of the Gods is underway. And that is the end of this chapter, and that's the end of this episode of The Newest Olympian. Thank you, Shania, so much for joining. If people want to find you doing stuff, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at THELADY_Artemis. Despite the name, I am a child of Athena.
Just keeping people on their toes, keep them guessing.
Yeah, keep them on their feet so you never know what's coming next. I want to know what you thought about these two chapters. There was quite a bit of action in chapter 17.
I know. I mean, they were good.
How many of your predictions lined up in that chapter?
The only thing would be like the pre-chapter guess of Percy taking on the weight. And then obviously the chapter 18 one of Zoe dying, because it was basically called Zoe Dies in this chapter. I certainly didn't anticipate the way in which it all went down. I did not think what was going to happen to Luke was going to happen. I did not expect Dr. Chase to come in. So there was lots of surprises. There's so much action going on. I really, really enjoyed it. And I could see why lots of folks were excited for me to get to these chapters specifically. I knew that these two had some hype about them. Didn't know exactly what about, but it was good. I'm excited, and I'm definitely excited to keep on going, which we'll be doing in the next episodes. But for now, thank you so much, Jania, for joining. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, when we see how the council goes, I'll see you later. Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor and TikTok account runner is Sherry Guo. The music is by Bettina Campamanes and Brandon Grugel, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you want to get involved in the community around the show, you can do so on social media. We are at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Facebook also has the spoiler group and the spoiler-free group. We also are at reddit.com/r/The Newest Olympian. If you want to take it to the next level, you can get in on the TNO Discord by joining our Patreon by going to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. Speaking of that Patreon, that's where bonus content lives. If you're looking for more TNO content, bonus episodes, director's commentary, monthly live streams, those all live there. And speaking of that Patreon, I want to give a huge shout out to our producer level patrons: Lotta Bartova, Kelsey Gillespie, The Damn Steam Nuggets, Emma Cooey, Vicky Garcia, Ellie Houskov-Chova, Veronica Bartova, Haley Hastings, Robin Garcia, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Tuff Beifong, Olivia Y, Craig McRoberts, Taylor Payne, Giselle Salvador, Peter Johnson the Twin, Sabrina Balsiger, Boney Pony, Heather McMillan, Casey Williams, Polly Burge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Bridget Lowry, Josh Sayre, Josh Wilkie, Abby Ryan, Wise Girl, Ashton Gabrielson, Marco Redhouse, Falcon Joey James, Christopher William Boucher, Lux, Caden Mack, Sam Reeby, Carly Allen, Riley Kiedis, Mary Kelly, Audra, Mackenzie, Mrs. O'Leary, Aaron Wood, Rodith Kalna, Milo Kim, Fred Cabras, Harlan Christ, CC Reeds 23, Sandkopf, Julia Kendall, Emil Oskar Thomason, Noah Bungard, Liz Cardigan, Shatzabobs, Michelle Spurgeon, Zachary Hamilton, Ginger Spursboy, Rachel Bernatowicz, and Sarah Neal. If you want to help out the show in a non-monetary way, spreading it via word of mouth is essential to the podcast's growth. If you think of someone that would like the show, you could reach out to them directly, say, hey, there's this podcast. You love Percy Jackson, listen to it. Or you've been looking for an excuse to read the Percy Jackson books, here's a digital book club. Or you could post about the show on social media, or leave it a rating and review on whatever podcasting app you're using. All of these things really do help, and I appreciate all of you who have done it in the past or will do it in the future. But I'm just so thankful that you listened to this episode, and I hope you tune into our next episode, where we will be joined by a very special guest, Kelly Beckman Schubert. It's a live show episode covering chapter 19 of Percy Jackson and the Titan's Curse, but until then, I will pursue you later. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's me, ASMR Mike. So as mentioned, I'm currently in Sydney, Australia, and as mentioned in the mid-roll break, it's raining quite a bit. So for this ASMR Mike segment, I'm just going to open the window and take a voice memo from my phone of what the city sounds like in the rain here on this fine morning in Sydney, Australia. Thank you so much for listening.